We got a problem, black boy. What are you even doing around here?
I'm black.
We are talking On the Other Foot. This one is directed and written by Freddy Krueger Nowaka. Apologies if I've got that name wrong. And this is a kind of a comedy movie, which is a kind of a body swap one. It's essentially, you know, what it's like to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, you might say. Now, body kind of swap movies are actually one of my favourite little subgenres of the comedy movies. I've enjoyed many of them. This one is a body swap movie that has a social political message in it. And I'll be honest with you, I try and stay away from politically charged movies, if I'm honest. But I got sent this one to review. But I thought, you know, should I review it? Because I always find, you know, it's somewhat of an awkward conversation to have at times. But I do like body swap movies, so I thought I would give it a go. Anyway, this is a low-budget British movie about this this guy who lives in, I'm assuming, kind of London somewhere. And he's a family man, but he is somewhat of a racist, you might say. You know, he's a kind of a middle-aged guy. His daughter's dating a black guy. He's a taxi driver. He kind of doesn't want to take, you know, anyone from a kind of like a ethnic background. He kind of complains when he goes to the dentist, and it's like, you know, no kind of white dentist there. All this kind of thing. And because his daughter is dating a black guy, she kind of tries and convinces him to, you know, change his kind of attitude, and takes him to this kind of like gospel church, where this kind of gospel preacher does some kind of spell on him and puts like this kind of these beads in his pocket, which changes him to a black guy. But he's still got the same mind, if you like. And then he obviously experiences what it's like to be a black person here in the UK and experience things from obviously that perspective. Well, what will happen exactly? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss what I think works in this movie. So as I've mentioned, I do enjoy body swap movies, and you know, normally it's kind of like someone going from old to young, or young to old, or male to female, or vice versa. I don't recall seeing one where we have someone kind of like changing ethnicities. I don't know if there is one, but I just haven't seen it. So it's kind of a little bit of a fresh take on a popular comedy genre, to be honest. And it is an intriguing premise, I have to say. You know, and I do quite like some of the kind of the aspects that this movie portrays. So I think one aspect which I got to commend the filmmaker for here, that I think would have been an easy path, is to make our main character an unlikable character all around. Now, it makes it very clear he has kind of like prejudiced attitudes towards people who are non-white. You know, he goes to these kind of like National Front meetings, which are kind of like, I don't know if you have them in America and things, but they're kind of like meetings where it's all about, you know, keeping Britain white and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, we see lots of that, but we also see him as a loving family man. And the way he treats his wife, the way he kind of treats his daughter, you know, it seems like he has some good qualities in him. And I think it would have been easy for the filmmakers here to make the guy a completely unlikable character with no kind of redeeming qualities. But I think they wisely chose to, you know, just to show you it's not always the case of, excuse the pun, black and white. You know, people are complex and they have complex facets to their personality, and it's not always one thing or another. So that was, I thought, was, you know, a well-written idea really for this kind of character. And that, yes, there are some amusing sequences within this movie where we have this kind of like this culture shock. You know, he's introduced this kind of like a group of like black friends and things, and they just think he's weird because of the way he's kind of acting and stuff like that. So I think if you are from the black community, I think it will be. It is still funny, even for me as a white person, but it's, you know, I think maybe the jokes will land better still if it was obviously if you're from like the black community or even kind of like an ethnic minority you know, because obviously it's meant to be that kind of fish out of water comedy sort of thing, and you could appreciate maybe a little more. So that was quite good. I thought the characters here were very likeable. So we have a variety of different characters, and we were introduced to, you know, for example, his daughter's boyfriend, things like this. Some of his kind of daughter's boyfriend's friends. Likeable characters, I have to say. You know, everyone here is a pretty good. You've got Peter Andre in a small but pointless cameo, I have to say. But nonetheless, if you like a bit of, it's probably the biggest name. It's the only kind of person I recognise, I have to say. But nonetheless, yeah, he's kind of in here in a very, very small kind of capacity. And yes, obviously, it is trying to point out political messages and things like this. So, you know, depending on how you feel about that, that's obviously going to be a factor whether you want to see it. I think some films can do this and kind of make it not feel like it's kind of overshadowing the kind of the movie as a kind of narrative form of entertainment and be more of an infomercial. I've got to say there are times where this, and I'll talk about this again in a minute, this movie does do that. It does, unfortunately, hammer you home a little bit too hard at times, but, you know, a lot of the time it is just a kind of like a whimsical kind of comedy, and you can enjoy it, the majority of it, I think, at least for this. And I do, you know, obviously it's trying to, you know, promote a positive message, so I can't take that kind of away from it. And yeah, there are some funny gags. Okay, so let's transition to what doesn't work. So it's a low budget film, and it suffers a little bit from obviously being a low budget. So the main issue for me, well, I have two main issues with this. One I've kind of touched on, which we'll kind of talk about now. It's like, it's kind of, when it's talking about its social political messages, unfortunately it's a little ham-fisted when it does that. I'll give you one example, but it isn't the only example here. We have our main character, you know, as a black guy, but obviously with a minor that's kind of like this white sort of character, and he's outside like a shop or something, and there's these two kids that are playing. One's black and one's white, and the black kid asks the white kid if he can play with his gun, like a toy gun sort of thing, you know, like a super soaker thing or something. And then his mum literally stops right in front of our character and says, "You know, little whatever your name is, you can't play with guns because you're a black boy, and you just can't do that because, you know, bad things will be put upon you." And it's like, it's so ham-fisted. The movie feels like it stops to kind of deliver this kind of infomercial. And, you know, it's just not subtle. The movie is not subtle when it kind of comes to these kind of sometimes points. There are a few points where I think it does it a little better. There's also, you know, very, very kind of like obvious sort of like, and quite frankly, quite preachy messages here. So, although I think the message comes across more subtly in other scenes, there are scenes here that I just think it's just very, very ham-fisted and delivered in a kind of a very kind of like, quite frankly, preachy way at times, which is a little bit of a shame. I feel if the director had maybe pulled back a little bit and, you know, not feel the need to kind of like almost crowbar these kind of situations in, I think it could have done. Now, I'll go one step further than this because I have to say, and, you know, maybe this will be controversial, but when our character is black, whenever he encounters anyone white, they always have a negative reaction to him. And I gotta say, I think it needed to have a little bit more balance to it, because unfortunately, you know, any kind of, I don't know, you know, you could argue it's a shorter, you know, it's only a film. They've only got so many time. You can't kind of like, it doesn't serve any purpose if you come across someone who's perfectly fine and not racist whatsoever. So I understand that. But the problem is here is that every white person, even if it's a relatively minor thing, like moving, like this woman like moves her bag when this guy's sort of sitting next to him and stuff. You know, I get that this stuff happens, don't get me wrong, but it seems like every interaction that this person has a kind of a negative kind of consequence, with the exception of, you know, obviously the guy's sort of girlfriend, really. So, you know, it's again I think it needed to have a little bit more subtlety in the kind of the writing, and it just seems, again, somewhat kind of ham-fisted. Okay, what else? I think the other main problem I have with this film is the character, when he's a black guy, does not seem like the same person in regards to his personality. So our character, when he's a white guy, is like a middle-aged kind of like East End sort of, not gangster type, but kind of like a bit of a Cockney geezer, middle-aged guy. And when he's a black character, the same, you know, the same mind and all that, he kind of like doesn't act the same. He acts kind of quite a lot different. There's one or two instances where, you know, he'll say something which would be in line with it, but a lot of the time you feel it's not the same person, and obviously it isn't the same person in reality. It's two different actors. But they don't do a good enough job here of making it seem like it's the same sort of character. So it doesn't quite seem like you're buying into that premise as much, because they just he seems more like goofy and kind of like, you know, just a little bit more silly, making like weird like facial expressions. When he's a white guy, he doesn't do, you know. So again, it's kind of like, it doesn't quite match. So some smaller issues I have is the kind of like the science, so to speak, of this of the actual body swap, to me, was poorly handled. So as when you're watching this movie, it doesn't really make sense about what you're seeing, because it looks like, and it explains it in some exposition later on, but we can only, the character is only black when he goes outside of his house. Otherwise, when he's in his house, he's white, but you can see he's got a black reflection. And it's like, when I was watching this, I was like, is this in his head, or is this happening? But the movie doesn't do a good enough job of kind of like giving that information, basically. You're thinking, I can't tell if this is like, is he just seeing that he's black, or, you know, is he black, but we're kind of seeing it as he's white to demonstrate it's the same person. The movie doesn't do a good enough job of really kind of setting that up. And then we have this kind of internal monologue where he almost has two voices talking to himself, and again, it doesn't really make sense. It's like, I don't understand why there's this monologue there, because it's kind of, he almost arguing against himself, but it's like, is there going to be two personalities? Again, so these things are kind of introduced and then just kind of like not really kind of set up, to be honest. And you know, so it has some issues in regard to the actual body swap mechanism, so to speak, in its kind of own right. Some of the acting is a little bit on the kind of the weaker side, I have to say. Again, not from everyone, but there are some characters here that I feel just were a little bit kind of, you know, a little bit unconfident in their kind of line delivery, so we say. And then the kind of the final thing I say is something that I would have liked to have seen, and that will be another scene at the end of the movie. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but I feel this movie needed to have another scene where we needed to have our main character maybe see his kind of daughter's boyfriend again, or his daughter's boyfriend's family, because it's kind of set up. And then I quite enjoyed those scenes, but I would have liked to have seen like the kind of like what happens sort of later on, and to sort of to demonstrate how his you know, opinion may have changed. Now we do get a kind of scene like that, but I think that again was a little bit ham-fisted. That would have been a better way to do it, if you would ask me. So overall, I gotta say, this movie is fun. I still enjoyed the kind of the body swap kind of the premise here. I think it's an interesting take to kind of do it in a different way rather than kind of age or gender. You know, ethnicity is like a natural progression, I suppose. So that was as a fun concept. There are some kind of fun moments in this movie. There's some fun characters, but as I've mentioned, there are some issues with this film as well. I have to say, the issues for me do knock it below an average film for me, but it's still fun if you like that kind of genre. You know, if you've seen it, let me know what you think. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.